Working today. Why are you so high? You were not this high last time. We're adjusting. Does everyone have a Chromebook as needed? All right, clear space for being in the shot here to here, so basically from the bump over. All right, prosecution, let's go first.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a 1 minute recap of fact, not opinion.
I know, but okay, so I guess, do I just like recap my side and then they'll recap their side? Okay, so I guess.
Important things witnesses said yesterday for your side.
Okay.
I only even typed up men what happened yesterday.
Oh wait, Joseph, you have it. So do I come up here?
Yeah.
Alright, so I guess yesterday we kind of we had Joseph give his opening statement and kind of like set up what the trial was going to be like. And then we called up 4 witnesses to the stand yesterday, starting with Calypso. We kind of emphasized the fact that like that Odysseus left Calypso. He was really selfish, and he left him to a lot of suffering and angst. And he didn't feel any guilt when he cheated on Penelope with Calypso for 7 years straight. So that's something that we hope the jury should remember. And then the next witness we decided to call up was Poseidon. And the key thing that Poseidon brought up that the prosecution believes needs to be heard is the fact that no other hero had ever received a punishment this bad. So like any like comparison to other heroes shouldn't be valid because like Odysseus is just a whole new level of like bad person. And then I guess the third person we called up was Antinous. And Antinous kind of told you that like Odysseus came in and unethically slaughtered all the suitors and just kind of massacred them because they didn't have any of their weapons, and that's like inherently wrong because like heroes aren't supposed to do things that are like immoral. They're supposed to create ingenious solutions and not like just use cheap tactics. And then the fourth person we called up was Polyphemus, and that kind of was like we talked about like how Odysseus blinded Polyphemus and like how Odysseus was trespassing and he had the option to leave. And he still blinded him, and on top of that, he kind of boasted in his face, just like boost his own ego. So that's like the key things that all the witnesses said yesterday, and the prosecution hopes to extend that throughout the case today.
All right, and defense, you have 1 minute, facts, not opinion. Shared by witnesses. Ready, set, go.
Oh, wait, can I set a timer?
It's already going.
Oh, okay. So, let's analyze the multitude of ways that they tried to meddle the timer. The subject at hand is whether or not Odysseus' claims of heroism are true or false. Refer back to the definition of hero. Someone who does something brave or good that people respect or admire them for. They make multiple arguments about how Odysseus was selfish in X example, or dumb in Y example. And they try to say that this should prove that Odysseus should not be able to claim heroism. But all heroes make mistakes. Our argument is that in fact Odysseus was heroic in a multitude of examples, from saving thousands of soldiers during the Trojan War to leaving Calypso despite what he was offered, to saving Ithaca and making it prosperous. Our argument is that on net Odysseus' actions have been more heroic than not. A hero is not a buff, perfect dude that can do anything and solve any problems. Homer purposefully characterizes heroes as being those who do have some fatal flaws and do make mistakes. The characteristics and examples they bring up are not responsive to the fact that Odysseus has done brave acts that have helped people and saved people's lives. Their witnesses repeatedly themselves showed that they were the reason for his actions. They had murderous intentions. They were selfish in a multitude of examples. They cursed him, killed his men, and repeatedly disrespected him. Don't penalize him for this, and this does not take away from the actions that Odysseus has committed to save people's lives. Therefore, we're going to ask you to try him as innocent.
All right. Alright, here's how this is working. Prosecution gets a chance to call their last witness. You have,
Alright,
you have,
prosecution would like to call,
you have
sorry.
3 minutes. You guys will have a minute and a half to then cross-examine. Go team. Whenever you're ready.
Prosecution would like to call Odysseus to the stand.
Alright, just step forward.
Me?
I don't know who's doing the questioning.
I am.
Unfortunately, as we all know, Odysseus has passed away. He resides in the underworld. To bring him
Oh.
forth for testimony, you must dance to bring him forth. Thank you. Alright. On the Odyssey, I, Eurylochus, coward of the crew, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me Zeus. Boo.
Is Odysseus the type of guy that you would trust your life with?
Well, Odysseus was my leader, my captain, so I had no choice in the matter. However, do I feel someone else could better fill his role? Yes.
Would you believe that you would trust a hero with your life?
I would want to trust a hero with my life, yes.
Alright. Do you believe that Odysseus was very responsible?
See, that's a tough question because you're looking at like what's best for long term and what's best for short term. Those can be different answers.
Long-term wise, was Odysseus responsible?
Long term, his end goal was to get us home, so I would say yes, he kept trying to work towards that responsibility.
The prosecution has no further questions.
Your witness. You wanna ask about short term?
Okay.
We can go back up.
So when you talk about Odysseus' responsibilities, would you agree that a lot of the deaths on Odysseus' crew were your fault?
My fault?
Yeah.
My fault?
Yes, ma'am. Or sir?
I'm a big, strong man, thank you very much. See, I don't see it as that way. I was put into an unmovable situation where I had to make a call because Odysseus could not, or would not. So I had to make the best call for the crew.
But despite the fact that he specifically told you and the rest of your crew to not do, go onto Helios' island and kill his cattle, you decided to anyways, correct?
I decided to do it for what's best for my crew because we would have died of starvation. And as we all know, famine is the worst death of all men. So rather than have to die from starvation, I told my men I would rather us eat the cows, beg for forgiveness from Helios, so gods can be forgiving. It's happened before. And even if they decided to smite us and kill us anyways, I'd rather die by that than die by starving to death.
Do you think that if you had just listened to Odysseus and maybe just been a little bit more patient, you would have been able to last longer?
I don't feel like I answered that question.
Okay. No question.
Yeah, where's the?
Yeah, where's the objection sheet?
This is day 2. It's advanced day. Do you have any more questions for your witness?
Short term, go.
You get the cross again? Okay, fine.
The prosecution, I guess, would like to ask, Eurylochus, in the short term, did you feel that Odysseus' actions were responsible or irresponsible?
In the short term, there was a variety of options presented. And sometimes he would show selfishness and put his own needs against ours, which is such as like going to the cave as a Cyclops and refusing to leave, even though I asked that we do. And then at other times he did try to do what was best for the men, like the choice he made between Scylla and Charybdis. Again, maybe I would have made a different choice, but I wasn't a leader, so I can't say.
Don't you think that his decisions of like these like selfish decisions ended up outweighing the non-selfish ones because they ended up in the entire crew dying?
Please, the witness.
Sustained. Counselor, rephrase your question.
Do you think that the selfish actions kind of outweigh the selfish ones?
Ultimately, it led to all his crew's deaths. So I would say yes, it definitely does outweigh because it cost all of them their lives. And they lost the ability to go home, see their families again, brag about the victory of war, and just return to normalcy.
The prosecution rests their case.
Your witness. By the way, correct me if you do your dance, face the dance.
This?
Say it, he just goes talk to you.
That's questions.
Don't go back to the underworld now. Unless you wanna do dance.
Dance. No, you want James to get up here and do the dance. There we go.
There's no line of questioning. Could be disrupted by a dance.
Dance.
Oh,
I'm about to do a back flip. That's not much of a dance.
Oh, okay. You could have waited like 5 seconds. I could get
So, Eurylochus, would you agree that all humans do make mistakes, and Odysseus tried to make the decision that he thought was best at the time?
That all what make mistakes?
That humans.
All humans make mistakes. I would agree, yes, all humans, all mortals make mistakes.
So, why did Odysseus close men? And didn't your decisions that were despite Odysseus's prophecies? No.
Did my decisions affect it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't decide to go to the island of Lastrygonians, which is surrounded by cannibals that are giants and they eat all the people, and we lost all our ships except for one.
Okay.
I didn't make that call.
The defense has now heard what's said.
All right. Witness dismissed, back to the underworld we go. Boom. All right. Boom, boom, boom. We now have presentation of evidence and the direct examination by the defense.
The defense would like to call up Penelope, please.
Penelope, please come forward. Evidence and such. Yes. You got to dance. No, not for What was the epithet you made up for yourself? What was the epithet you made up for yourself? Yeah, the one that's in your letter. Alright, please use your right hand. Penelope, the woman of no checkers, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you Zeus?
You do?
You may proceed to question your witness.
So, Penelope, what qualities can you differentiate between your husband Odysseus and the suitors you encountered while he's gone? And if there are any given qualities, do some of these qualities relate to Odysseus being the hero?
I think that Odysseus is heroic and that he's essentially the love of my life, and none of the suitors could stand up to his potential.
So, how did the exposure to all the suitors affect your perception if Odysseus will come back? And if so, what were your initial thoughts and emotions in order to help maintain your relationship with Odysseus?
I always had hope that he would come back, and because I always believed that he was loyal, and I never had a doubt that he wouldn't come back, so I never chose any suitors.
So, even though Odysseus has made some mistakes in the past, do you think it's right to claim Odysseus that his actions were heroic?
Even though he made mistakes, I still think he is heroic because essentially he ended up coming back and saving Ithaca.
So, how does your piece of evidence, the handcrafted bed by your husband, represent your bondage and romance after Odysseus' 10 years in the Trojan War and the 10-year journey back to Ithaca?
The bed represents how much he loved me, and I knew when he made it that he would always be in love with me and that we would always be happy together no matter how far away we were from each other.
Okay. The defense has no further questions.
Prosecution, your witness.
Did you know while
Counsel, do I throw you out of this court?
What?
Do I throw you out of this court?
No, I'm sorry.
Tampering with a witness?
Yeah, objection,
Did-
tampering.
I think I'm doing my job, thank you. I hold you contempt of court. It starts at 7:45 in the morning, and lasts 30 minutes, which you write a letter of apology to the court. Goes in your permanent record. Thin ice. team.
Did you know that while Odysseus was on his journey, he played checkers with other women?
I knew once he came back and told me.
How did this make you feel when you found out?
It made me upset, but essentially I learned to get over it because he came back for me, and when he could have stayed on the islands, he came back.
What hardships did you go through while Odysseus was gone?
I had to deal with all the suitors, and I had to deal with people not trusting me as a leader.
How does this make you feel that when you were feeling like that, Odysseus was having checkers with the sea nymph?
It makes me upset, but he still came back for me. Like, I had to take care of our son, and I did have to, like, rule everyone, but he came back, and I'm so bummed out that he's still in love with me, and it never.
City.
Do you think he came back for you or for the fame of saving his home city?
I think he came back for both because he's loyal to Ithaca and he's loyal to me.
Then why would he not send a letter back to you while he was gone, letting you know he was okay for the 20 years that he was gone?
Because he couldn't. How was he supposed to send the letter? How was it supposed to get to me?
I don't. Can't answer questions, can
I'll remind you that they're the ones asking the questions.
I do not think that a letter would be able to get to me if he tried to send one.
Counselors, we need a recess to replan so we don't whisper across my courtroom.
I'm mad. No, it's fine, you got that.
Does it still feel like Odysseus is the same person as he was before the war?
I think now he's even more heroic because before he was just a man he was a king and he ruled, but now since he came back, he's become stronger and bigger and he's learned many lessons through his journey.
Okay. Since you know him so well, do you believe that Odysseus is prone to letting his emotions and his overinflated ego get ahead of him and drive his decisions to the wrong way?
Relevance?
Like irrelevance?
Yeah.
Sustained. Please move on, Counselor.
Knowing so much about Odysseus, can you safely say he was irresponsible or careless?
I don't think he was irresponsible or careless. I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but I don't think he was ever careless.
So, you're saying that being not careless is losing all your men on a trip, taking 20 years back to get back from a war.
Objections? Once again, like relevance?
Irrelevance.
Yeah, irrelevance.
Sustained, this wasn't covered during the original questioning, so you can't cross evidence that has been presented. Please move on, Counselor.
Prosecution doesn't have further questions.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions for your witness?
Our next is. Oh, yeah, so calling Alcinous.
King Alcinous to stand.
What?
King Alcinous.
Thank you, Coco, for telling us all of your witnesses.
Clearly not
Good
lying.
thing that's not required to do.
I know.
I
This
just,
is a very
we traded.
What is your,
Wait, you guys didn't tell us about Calypso.
Yes, we
Yeah, we did.
It's on the docket.
hey, counselors, in the parking lot, not my courtroom, thank you. What is the effort you can make for yourself, King Alcinous? The very generous guy. King, okay. Right hand. King Alcinous, the very kind and generous king. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and the truth, so help you Zeus.
Yes, I do.
You may proceed to question your witness.
So, King Alcinous, what were your final reactions on how Odysseus was able to successfully handle the Cyclops volcanoes by simply ruining the monster and without unethically killing it?
He shows a leader and a hero because you need to be very clever, and so by finding a way out of the cave, this shows that he has the ability to think of ideas and get out.
So, may you please elaborate on how your given piece of evidence, the model of the ship given to Odysseus, symbolizes him, and what exactly made him worthy of being given that ship of yours?
So I heard his stories and his tales, and actually he thought a lot like me. and he's very smart, and the fact that he actually got out of all of the troubles and he's been through a lot, so I decided that anyone who comes to my island and needs help, I will provide a ship with a way home for him.
So whose fault do you think that Odysseus' men died?
You can't blame one person for the fault of every other. It's because, for example, for the cows, like Helios' cows, he told them not to eat them, but then his men still led them to eat them, and so he couldn't do anything about it, so it's not his fault.
And due to your exposure to Odysseus' journeys, what characteristics exactly made Odysseus unique from other respected Grecians? And how do these characteristics support the fact that Odysseus uses qualities to succeed in those given circumstances?
He's really clever, he has endurance, and even though he has like a lot of hardships that he had to overcome, he still did it and tried to find a way home because that was his goal.
Defense as no for question.
Your witness.
So when you mentioned like about the cows, like Helios' cows, and you say it wasn't his fault to like because of like it wasn't his fault that his men like ate the cows, right? Isn't a leader or like a hero kind of person supposed to have authority over their crew?
He was, but so he told them not to eat it, but then the gods put him to sleep, and the gods are of the highest power.
Right.
So he couldn't do anything about it.
Sure, but like if the people, if his crew, if he was truly a hero and his crew was like, oh, you're a great commander, then wouldn't the crew respect his word and not have eaten the cows regardless? Why do you think they mutinied if they didn't believe in Odysseus' responsibility and his ability to be a perfect hero or a good hero?
Because you can't.
Objection on the grounds of.
Irrelevant.
Definitely not that.
We definitely talked about the cows. You can't object on those grounds.
Objecting for.
Yeah, probably.
Not being hostile. One more touch against them, then you're done.
Ambiguous or unintelligible.
Nope.
Since it already asked the question.
Overruled. Too general or calls for a narrative answer would have been a more appropriate response.
So,
Because you can't expect everyone to have the same ideas. Like, even if they do respect them, maybe they just have different ideas that they want to go off of.
sure, but like, isn't the point of a hero to have authority and to like, for everyone to respect him, correct?
That's
Objection already asked and answered.
We already asked about authority. Please rephrase.
Okay, so what makes you think that like, if Odysseus was an apt hero, and if he wasn't irresponsible, then don't you think his crew would have listened?
Already asked and answered.
Did not.
You just asked it like 2 minutes ago.
Not as an answer, but you keep asking this witness to create a narrative that they were not involved in.
I just heard.
Rephrase.
Okay, moving
Can the
on.
prosecution ask for a recess?
You have a 1 minute recess. You also have a 1 minute recess from what I'm doing here, if needed. 1 minute, if you have to go run, get a sip of water, now's your time to do so. If you need to catch up on notes, do so. If you gotta text mom, do so. Quick.
Yeah, just one wrong.
I've seen you run faster on the football field. Go, go, go.
Can I resume?
Court is now back in session.
Alright, cool.
Please proceed.
So from what Odysseus told you when he recounted his story to you, don't you believe that his crew didn't exactly have the best trust in him?
I don't think it was a problem of trust. It was, like I said before, it was just they had different ideas, and yeah, he tried his best, but he can't be blamed for everything and all of their faults.
Sure.
In my opinion.
So, do you believe that in any scenario, like a leader or any sort of hero should not command respect?
Sustained.
Do you believe that if Odysseus was supposed to be an apt hero, alright, that was already asked. Okay, moving on. When you talk about like how he was able to get out of like these important scenarios, or like these like creative scenarios or whatever, don't you think that, is it worth getting out of like the Cyclops' cave, for example, with like this ingenious idea, if it's worth like killing most of his men and all of his men eventually?
You have to make sacrifices. You can't be a hero without sacrificing and going
So-
through trials. And if that means a few men, I mean,
So all of his men is the correct term.
well then,
Everyone who's involved.
some of them died because of their own fault, as mentioned.
Was there a question in there, Counselor?
What? Yes. Maybe.
Reading back the minutes, so all of them then.
Okay. So here's that's not a question. Okay. So tell me, is it like that? Did those people die? You're saying of their own accord, or like of their own faults? So can
Some
you
of them.
name a single person that died of his own fault?
Lucas,
What did he do?
he led his men to eat the cows.
Right, but so again, doesn't that come back to the earlier point that he only led his men because he wasn't confident in Odysseus's
No, because he had
responsibility?
different ideas.
And so the entire crew rallied behind one person with a different idea.
Apparently,
Is that feasible?
but that's not Odysseus' fault. That's who his men choose to listen to, and he was asleep
His
and
men,
stuff.
right, so his men choose to listen to not their hero, not their savior, but
Because it was
someone else,
convincing.
correct? It was convincing why? Because, or maybe it's,
No,
why
it's
was
okay.
it convincing?
Because they thought that famine was worse than drowning or getting killed or something by God.
Right, and they
And
were,
I don't think maybe Odysseus didn't give a really good reason.
don't you think that could be attributed back to his irresponsibility and just not being able to properly command his men?
But he couldn't do anything because the gods put him asleep, and maybe he should have said
It's
more.
not about like,
But
so is it about the present moment, or is it about the image that Odysseus leaves on his face?
Objections in general.
Or is it objection overruled? So is Odysseus like, oh yeah, so is it about like the present day moment, or is it about like the image that Odysseus leaves on his men as a responsible hero?
Can you rephrase that? I didn't get it.
So is it like, you say that like he was asleep, so he couldn't do anything. Shouldn't it be about like, not exactly the present day moment of what he's doing, but like his men's faith in him and like the fact that he's a responsible hero according to the defense?
Objection, ambiguous, and unintelligible.
Overruled. It's a question.
Because I think image is part of it, but also like I said before, you can't have everyone agree on one idea. So maybe he's better at leading people out of other situations, but in that sense, they had a different idea and he can stop them.
So why do you think he couldn't stop them? Like why
He
do you
was
think?
asleep.
Okay, no, not why do you think his crew didn't believe in him?
They believed him.
Why
in the
didn't
beginning.
they believe in his ideas when he is supposed to be the leader?
Objection, already asked and answered. She said
Same.
different ideas like 6
Okay,
times.
fine, okay. So when Odysseus came back and told you his story, right, about everything, why do you believe that he was telling the complete truth?
Because he needed a way home, and if he was desperate enough to go through all of these trials, then he would tell the truth.
So is it not possible for him to spin the story and put some slightly positive spin on negative events?
Well, he is telling the story, so of course he would try to add some of his own stuff, but I believe that you can't change facts. You can change facts to only a certain extent.
How do we know that they're facts?
Objection, relevance. Also lack of professional knowledge.
Sustained on both counts.
Okay. The prosecution rests in peace.
We just start speaking objection.
We got 13 minutes left.
That was actually called.
That was actually, at the end, stand. Order. Order in my court.
Witness.
Gentlemen, I'll throw you out of my court. What is it? Please make for yourself.
Keeper of knowledge.
Please raise your right hand. Athena, keeper of knowledge. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and the truth, somebody Zeus.
I do.
May you question your witness.
Would you agree that Odysseus' imperfections might even have made him more heroic?
Yes.
So, like, what trait specifically did you see that made you like come back to help him when you saw him in a desperate situation?
I saw that Odysseus, no matter how much pressure he was put under, he was always strategic and clever, and as the goddess of wisdom, that's really important to me.
So, would you agree that he tried his best to act in like the most brave and admirable way that he could?
Yes.
And do you think he, at best, like tried to protect his men and tried to convince them to engage in activities that would like keep them safe?
Objection, leading witness.
Sustained.
Okay.
Words are out.
Would you agree that Odysseus tried his best to protect his men?
Objection,
Objection,
leading
leading
question.
witness.
Sustained. You're presenting really only one answer in this case. Ask him more.
Okay.
Take one step back.
What did you think? Okay, whatever. Moving on. You've seen a lot of heroes in your time. Do you agree that none of them were like
Objection,
flawless?
leading the witness.
You need to hear the full question when you say objection.
You keep saying, do you agree?
Well,
But that's
do
not.
you think that any heroes have been flawless?
Most
Objection, narrative.
heroes have been.
Better phrasing of the question to help so we don't have this happen all day.
Do you think that there
Do
is
you
such
think heroes can be flawed or are they flawless? Presenting more than one scenario to the witness. So to ask it that way.
Do you think that heroes can be flawed or do they always have to be flawless?
I think flaws are what make heroes heroes because they overcome those flaws and they come back up from that to complete their journey.
Defense has no further questions.
Question for prosecution.
Do you believe that flaws usually result in every single crew member dying?
I believe that flaws can result in a number of tragedies, but they're not always completely because of a hero's flaw.
Why did you decide to aid Odysseus while he was in the war and on his journey back?
Because I saw that he was a strategic and wise leader, and as a goddess of wisdom, I found that very important.
Okay. During his journey home when you aided him, or in his journey to Ithaca, you witnessed Odysseus committed several immoral acts, correct?
I would not necessarily say that they were immoral as much as controversial.
So do you believe that murdering a bunch of suitors without weapons is moral?
I believe
the witness?
I'm
Cross.
cross.
With this unexplored topic, yes, go ahead.
I believe that
Objection irrelevance.
Thank you. Sustained.
Wait, so,
Now discussing in there to questioning. You've already had your moment of questioning. We're in cross.
so like you can like tell him what to object to?
No.
She was just aid, she was teaching.
Two, I've helped you guys several times, so. Cool it, counselor.
And the prosecution called for recess.
Have you guys already called for one? You already used yours. Unless the defense wants to. Nah, it's next one.
Prosecution rests this case.
Any more questions? We have 8 minutes left. So thank you. You may stand. You have 6 minutes question and they'll have to.
And then after that's closed.
Yeah. What is the original update you created for yourself? You may raise your right hand. Hey, order in my court, thank you. You may is loyal fighter to Odysseus. You swear to the truth, the whole truth, and the truth to help you Zeus. You may proceed with your witness.
So, why did you stay loyal to Odysseus unlike the other suitors in Ithaca? And what intentions and thoughts have made you stay loyal after the suitors in Ithaca found out Telemachus was going to find Odysseus.
Objection leading.
You asked me what
Sustained.
thoughts and why did you stay loyal?
Sustained, right?
Break up the questions.
So, why did you stay loyal to Odysseus unlike the other suitors?
I couldn't bring myself to agree with people who were trying to court my good friend's wife and the people who were trying to murder Odysseus' son.
And what intentions, how basically made you stay loyal after the suitors in Ithaca found out Telemachus was going to find it?
Because I knew they were bad people and I just didn't want to succumb to their overbearingness.
So, do you think that Odysseus' journey was an easy and enjoyable one? If not, what has made Odysseus'
Objection
journey?
leading.
Sustained. Rephrase, Counselor, if you want.
So, what, can you compare the rest of the suitors of Ithaca to Odysseus in which they had the intention to keep Ithaca in a prosperous state? If not, describe what the suitors of Ithaca have done.
Again, leading. Objection.
Sustained.
What characteristics do you admire in Odysseus that maybe have a positive approach to treatment?
I think he has very good leadership skills. He's very intelligent in very stressful situations, and overall he's just a very good person.
Defense has no further questions.
Thank you. Prosecution, your witness. You have 2 minutes.
So, in your direct examination, you mentioned that like you couldn't bring yourself to side with these other suitors, correct?
Yep.
Were these decisions made out of good moral? So, not out of love for Odysseus, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Second thing I'd like to ask. Odysseus left you in Ithaca for 20 years, correct?
Not exactly. He had to go to war.
Okay, but he was not with you?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that you faced any hardships during that time that you wouldn't have faced if Odysseus was there?
All the suitors and the deterioration.
Right, so can you tell me how, like, explain on that, like, can you elaborate a little bit on that, like?
Well, without the leadership of Odysseus, there's no drive for people to help maintain Ithaca's greatness, and it just fell.
So don't you believe that if Odysseus had been home sooner, gosh, if Odysseus had been home sooner, then do you think he would have been able to fix Ithaca faster?
Yes.
And Ithaca wouldn't have gotten so bad?
It would have gotten more well,
If he had fixed it faster, would it have gotten as bad?
no.
Okay. And then, does a hero traditionally, oh no, that's all probably alright, throughout his journey, do you believe Odysseus's like main goal was to kind of come home and help Ithaca? Or do you think it was more of just like kind of going out on conquest? Why do you think it took him 10 years? Is my question.
Poseidon?
Poseidon's curse?
Yeah.
Was that curse, do you think that curse was brought upon him by himself and his foolhardy actions, or just because Poseidon hates him?
Objection, lack of knowledge. Also ask for a general narrative.
You can't just name like 3 ways.
Yeah. You're just gonna spam everything on the
Two
list.
narratives and lack of knowledge because he wasn't there.
Sustained or love for rephrasing.
So, do you think that Odysseus is, like, the reason he was detained for so long is because of his own foolhardiness?
Somewhat, and also because of his crew.
What do you mean by his crew?
Eurylochus, who made some bad decisions.
Okay, the prosecution rests their case.
Any more questions?
How much time do you have?
For what?
How much time?
You could have 1 minute, they could have 1 minute.
For
No,
what?
I can go.
No,
For what?
Can I call you?
Defense rests.
Yeah.
Alright, it is now time to proceed to closing arguments. We begin.
Right now?
Who goes first? Prosecution. Oh,
You guys can go.
Yeah.
What, should I go right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have 4 minutes, counselor, beginning
Wait, can I have like 1 second? I need like write just the maze thing down.
10 seconds.
Okay.
What did you just say?
Sorry, go ahead.
Since 650 BC, there was a group of men that were ecstatic to reach a home over the profound victory, ready to sail home with complete trust in their commander. Yet after 2 years, they'd all end up dead, repenting for the consequences of their commander. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Sahil Sood. My partner Joseph and I represent the prosecution in today's trial, where we hope to prove that Odysseus is indeed not a hero. The key framing mechanism in this trial needs to be a net-basis scale. On net, do Odysseus' faint glimmers of these heroic deeds outweigh the perpetual sinning that he committed throughout these fateful 10 years? The defense is going to say like, oh, mistakes happen and stuff. But the key difference here is that every little oopsie doesn't mean the death of another person. That's not how life works. These little oopsies are a lot bigger than what the defense makes them out to be. Let's go over some of the facts in this trial. Our opening statement promised the jury testimonies from several witnesses proving Odysseus' glaring crimes that the defense attempts to gloss over. Starting with irresponsibility, go back to Antinous' testimony, where the court is informed of Odysseus' rash nature and disregard for any norms of Greek culture. Instead, he goes wherever his pride drives him. That's kind of like following a compass that instead of telling direction, tells you the time. You're not going to get anywhere. Eurylochus even tells you that all of the deaths were directly because of Odysseus' ineptitude. His crew didn't respect him, and Eumaeus says that him siding with Penelope was not out of love for Odysseus. There was no loyalty involved there. But then there's infidelity. Remember Calypso's word about Odysseus? He felt no guilt about cheating. No guilt. Any argument about pure intentions that the defense could bring up can be thrown right at Odysseus, preferably in the form of a stool. They're all rooted in mistruth. Another facet of his personality, his selfishness. When presented with a chance to communicate with the gods to help Calypso, he pretended like he didn't hear it and just got what he wanted. He's a really selfish person who's the kind of person to wake up in the morning and stare at his own reflection for 2 hours. That's the kind of person that the defense wants to brand as a hero. But then comes his disregard for both rules and ethics. Odysseus, he simply does what he wants. He barged into Polyphemus' house because he felt curious, stabs him in the eye, and blinds him. And Polyphemus tells you that led into a lot of physical and emotional anguish. And then Odysseus boasted about it just to boost his own ego. Or looking back to Antinous' testimony, we see that Odysseus inhumanely slaughtered the suitors in Ithaca because they believed he was dead, so they were in his house. This quite literally a massacre. It's like a genocide. Voting for the defense is the equivalent of claiming Hitler is a good man. In this case, you are morally reprehensible for these lives and have an ethical obligation to vote for the prosecution to make sure that genocide and massacre go unpunished. Now, the defense can stand up and say a number of things in an attempt to sway you. They can talk about how being a hero is not mutually exclusive from being bad, but this analysis is made by some 14-year-olds. Reference a study that Joseph brought up in opening from the NIH, which shows that being a hero and being bad are mutually exclusive. You're either bad or you're either a hero. We need to weigh these glimmers of hope versus these glaring evils and figure out which one he really is. They could try and compare him to Achilles, but Poseidon himself said that no other hero has received a punishment directly from the gods. This shows that Odysseus is like a whole new level of bad. So in this trial, your decision is clear-cut for one reason. This trial is weighed on a net scope. The evidence, the testimonies, the empirics, they all indicate that while Odysseus may have had his moments of gaining some common sense, overall he was an inept hero. This can be seen from all the things proved in today's trial, but ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I urge you to think of the poor souls whose lives Odysseus devastated. Think of poor Calypso, who was led on for 7 years, only to be rebuked by a selfish man who left her in despair. Think of Polyphemus, who was blinded and experienced great physical pain and emotional pain, even though he was trespassed upon. Think of the suitors, whose lives were massacred in the most inhumane way possible. Remember that definition Joseph brought up in the opening statement? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I believe that the evidence from this court case has sufficiently disproved that definition, and for that reason, I hope you find the prosecution, I hope you vote for the prosecution and find the defendant guilty of all crimes. Thank you.
Excellent. Defense. Order, my court.
Your Honor, members of the jury, the misleading statements the prosecution has repeatedly made have made this a very messy trial. Let's start off by remembering two things. The first is that the subject of the trial is whether or not Odysseus' claims of heroism are true. This is when we must refer to the opening overview, where we argue that a hero is a person who is admired for having done something very brave or having achieved something great. Therefore, the prosecution has the burden to prove that Odysseus has not done a single heroic act or an act that outweighs the other consequences they bring up. The trial is not to weigh Odysseus' life's actions, it's to show that he's done something that could be considered great, admirable, or brave. If we prove that, Odysseus falls under the definition and should be allowed to claim heroism. Jane even tells you that heroism is not exclusive with flaws. Look to the example of Achilles. Their witnesses argue themselves that Achilles was a great hero. However, he mutilated Hector's body, he cheated on his wife, and his arrogance killed many of his comrades throughout the Iliad. They tell you that no heroes been punished by the gods, but Achilles was killed by Apollo. Hercules was forced to kill his family by the gods. This is blatantly false. And plus, our Achilles example alone proves that a hero doesn't have to be a buff dude who solves every major problem and has every major noble characteristic. Because Achilles only did one major heroic act that made him remembered forever in Greek history. He killed Hector. Similarly, we only have to prove that Odysseus has done something major and brave himself. And we give multiple examples. The first is that during the Trojan War, Odysseus saved thousands of lives. He had the great achievement of coming up with the ingenious Trojan horse plan that saved the Greek army from the Trojans and saved thousands of his comrades. Even if we make the misinformed conclusion that every death on Odysseus' ship was his fault and that he genocided the suitors, this outweighs all of their points. All of the lives saved in this action alone save significantly more than all the men that they argue that Odysseus killed. But if that isn't enough for the jury, we tell you Odysseus never lost sight of his goal, returning home. Calypso offered him everything, from immortality to eternal pleasure, and yet he decided that he valued his home and his family the most. So when the gods gave him the chance to leave, he immediately took it. The prosecution has accused Odysseus of being selfish and a cheater, and that his actions reflect not those of being a hero. However, the Odyssey itself clearly shows that as soon as that he was held against his will with Calypso, and when the gods gave him the chance, he didn't help her out, and instead, he did the noble thing, and he returned to Ithaca to save his people and save his family. They make it sound like he abused the Polyphemus, who just wanted him to join the family. In reality, Polyphemus ate Odysseus' crew, threatened to spill his guts, and cursed him for the rest of his voyage. The only defense he was able to provide is that Odysseus demanded gifts. This is an extremely disproportionate punishment for such a thing, but in reality, Odysseus just wanted Polyphemus to show respect for his guests and the gods, while Polyphemus was rude and murderous. If anything, his daring escape from the island was yet another example of how the courage it took to execute such plans and of how he was a hero, because of how he saved his men from the Cyclops. They again claim that Odysseus was cruel to Antinous and slaughtered these suitors. In reality, we have seen that these suitors lived in Odysseus' home, ate his food, harassed his wife, caused Ithaca to go into poverty and despair, and attempted to kill his son, all because they wanted wealth and power over Ithaca. Instead, Odysseus came and he defeated them and all the other suitors, saving his island and making it a more prosperous place. He saved the citizens of the island from the impoverished state they were in and prevented power-hungry brutes from becoming kings. If that isn't a great and brave achievement, what even is? The out-of-context traits they discuss like selfishness and stupidity don't deny he's a hero. If anything, Homer characterizes heroes as being flawed and making mistakes. None of these examples prove that Odysseus shouldn't be allowed to claim heroism. They only prove that Odysseus is just a human at heart. This is not about the perception of Odysseus' character, which is what their NIH studies is about. It's a question of whether or not he's committed a heroic act that can justify his claims. Our argument is simple. It's at 3:50.
4:05.
Argument. Okay. Therefore, we're going to ask you to try to say the same thing.
Oh, 3 out of 4.
What?
That's a 6-page essay.
Order. Members of the jury, you've heard all testimony concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine the facts. You and you alone are the judges of the fact. Once you decide what facts the evidence proves, you must then apply the law and render a verdict. Are we ready to do so? You may take your Chromebooks if you need the evidence, take your jury sheets from yesterday and a writing utensil and go next door to Mrs. Strangelo's room.